Well, I got to tell you, so Jane, I realize, from the point at which my parents started taking me to movies, that I have been watching your career for as long as I've been watching movies and TV shows. But to be able to, I know that doesn't really make any sense, but to be able to have a conversation with you today means so much. And I just want to just start, like, how did you decide you even wanted to become an actor in the first place?
I didn't. Well, first of all, when I was taken to kindergarten, my parents were told that I had to have remedial classes for having, I was unable to pronounce my R's. I would say a wound, wan. So that was a problem. And I have flat feet. So flat feet, speech impediment. I was told I had to go to ballet classes or learn how to walk on the side of my feet or something, get arches. And anyway, I ended up doing speech, and then I ended up becoming a ballerina and dancing with the Kirov eventually. So, tell me I can't do something, and for some reason that's what I ended up doing. So I didn't intend to be an actress, but I think my sisters and I, we used to put on these sort of little kind of pantomime things, Christmas shows at home, and my father would write them, and I always somehow ended up in the lead. So I suppose I started acting at home. And then when I was 13 and I went to the ballet school that I got into and I had a partial scholarship to, they required you to do acting as well as singing and all kinds of dance as well as ballet. So I studied acting properly from the time I was 13.
What were some of the acting lessons that you learned early on that you use to this day?
Well, we did improv, which I always loved. And what did we learn? We did some mask work, which was kind of weird and bizarre, but it was interesting. But I was never taken seriously by my school as an actress because I was a dancer who was in the acting class. When I injured myself and couldn't dance anymore, I then went into what was called 50-50. So you were sort of repurposed to be in musical comedy. Mm-hmm. But the school had an open kind of competition at the end of the year where somebody that had nothing to do with the school would come and adjudicate, and they didn't know if you were a ballet student or a drama student or 50-50. They would just watch you do your thing, and I used to win the drama, and I got into trouble for that because I was not supposed. So then they did Children in Uniform, and they gave me the only worst, literally the worst role in Children in Uniform. There is a character called Oda who has one line. And it's clearly odious. Yeah. So now they advertise the school as me having studied drama there. But I remember very distinctly being given the sideline, like, no, you know.
Well, when you started acting, it didn't take long for you to get onto your first film set. What was that like to be on a film set with a very famous director and, the whole production?
Which one? You mean Oh What a Lovely War?
Yes.
Well, I was a dancer, and I actually danced with the Kirov Ballet at Covent Garden, but because we did all these other modalities, I'd done jazz, and I'd injured my knee. They couldn't do surgery, so I ended up kind of doing musical singing and dancing, and I had one line in Richard Attenborough's first movie ever, which was Oh What a Lovely War. Maggie Smith was in front of us. There were 6 of us or 8 of us dancing and singing behind. And it was a great experience. And I had one line. Maggie Smith said, "Is there a man digging your garden when he should be digging trenches?" And I run up and I go, "He should be digging trenches," which is when I realized I needed more vocal education. But I was spotted immediately by the top agent in England, a man called John Redway. His agency eventually became CMA, ICM, and all of that. And he turned apparently to Richard Attenborough and said, "Who's that third from the left?" And Dickie said, "Yep, I know, third from the left." And he said, "I think she could make it." And so he offered me a representation.
Well, the amazing thing is, since I have been doing a lot of research on your career, is that you just dove right in. In 1971, the film The Only Way
Yes.
Your character, your family is trying to get out of Denmark before the Germans really take over, and watching the dynamic with your character and what's at stake, and this is like a big feature for you. What was that like? Because I mean, this is more than just one line now.
No, I mean, this was absolutely fantastic. And I was with Martin Potter, who just finished Satyricon. So to go from Fellini's Satyricon to this little movie in Denmark was obviously quite something for him. I was playing a ballet teacher, so I was very comfortable with that. Yeah. You know, I've always been able to use that dance training. I mean, even in the thing I'm doing right now, the other day I was dancing again. But it was a little nerve-wracking, but I loved it, and I was surrounded by really wonderful Danish actors. It was a lovely role, and I remember, though, how I got it, because the producer met me a couple of times and then said to me, I chose you rather than this other actress who I was going to hire, who's very well known. And I said, really? He said, yes. He said, look, you're both represented by the same agency, but you're much prettier than she is. And he showed me a picture of me, 2 pictures of me in the same outfit, one looking like this and one looking like that. And underneath one of them, it said Olivia Hussey, and she just starred in Romeo and Juliet. So I got the part. I told Olivia, I said, you missed out on a really, small movie after Romeo and Juliet. But that was how I got the part.
You must have just picked up so much as an actor from working with this cast on The Only Way.
Definitely, yes. I mean, what did I learn? I have always, I've been always asked what's my technique. And my technique was to actually imagine I am that person and learn all the lines. And like Laurence Olivier always said, learn your lines and don't knock over the furniture. And I tried to do that, and I was very comfortable playing a dancer, so that was easy. And Martin Potter was by far the most beautiful creature I'd ever seen on the planet. I didn't quite know how to handle that. I was very young, and I don't know that I was very good in it, but I was surrounded by some really good actors, and they were very real. It was not, no one was mannered. Everything was very real. So I just kind of followed their pattern.
Well, you are good in it, because I just watched it on Amazon Prime. So
it was okay?
It was excellent.
Oh, good. Well,
that was excellent.
Got away with that one.
It holds up. But, so when I was very, very young, my parents, without even meaning to turn me into a film buff, they took me to a lot of grown-up movies, probably before I should have gone to those kinds of movies. One of them, of course, in 1973 was Live and Let Die. And that was probably the first movie I ever saw on a big screen. How did you get the role of Solitaire in the first James Bond movie with Roger Moore? Okay,
so I'm with this agent, and I'm beginning to get some work. I'm playing in the Strauss family, playing Joseph Strauss. Then the star of that was Anne Salabers. The next thing I know, I get into this English series called The Aeneid Line, just for one day, one episode, and they immediately signed me for the whole thing. The show came out the first episode on the BBC. My agent got a call that the Bond people wanted to meet me. He said I was unavailable, so they went away. And then a week later, they called again and said, no, we really want to see you. And he said, well, okay. And he said to me, they make other movies, so you might as well go meet them. So I went to meet them. What I didn't know is that in those days, there would be a Cubby Broccoli movie Bond or a Harry Saltzman Bond. And Cubby was the first person to call and was told no. Well, Harry was the second person to call because he'd seen me in the Aeneid Line as well. So when the two had a big fight over who had discovered me, and I'm standing there going, that's how you get a job? And what I'd done is I'd been told that with my hair off my face, I looked completely different from how I normally look like, because I had, a center part with hair that I sat on. And so I put all my hair up in a hat, so I'd, have the look of what I looked like without hair down my face. And when I came in, Harry had said, take off your coat, take off your hat. And I took off this hat and my hair came tumbling down. And I literally got the job that way. Immediately after being told that I couldn't stop this fight between the two, I kind of, like a schoolgirl, said, "Excuse me, you both saw the episode at the same time on television?" And they said, "No, please have a cup of tea and go away." My agent said, "Would you please drive right away to the agency and we'll discuss this." So I back my Volkswagen Beetle into Harry Saltzman's Rolls Royce.
Oh,
And then I go to my agent, who insists that even though I am underage, I'm still underage, that I should have a gin and tonic.
oh, jeez.
And which was also not necessarily good. Anyway, long story short, the Enid Line producer insisted on not letting me out. His wife told him that night that he would forever be known as the person that discovered Jane Seymour. And somehow he listened to his wife, and they let me do 2 episodes of just my scenes in the recordings. And before I went away to, where did I go to? New Orleans first. And then I went to New Orleans for 2 weeks, and then I came back, finished the Anita line, and then I went back to Jamaica and finished. So that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the producer's wife.
But this is what I mean, like the Oneida line and Live and Let Die kind of happening at the same time.
One after another after another.
You're a young actor.
20.
Wow.
A very young 20, I might add. I used to make all my own clothes. I never had any money. So when they announced to the world that, I was the Bond girl, they kind of looked at my clothes in shock. Ran around the corner to Chanel or something, or Christian Dior, bought a belt and a silk scarf. I mean, really? And then proceeded to tell me that they were going to dye my hair, probably cut it. I had 2 different colored eyes, so that wouldn't work. I'd either have to have a contact lens to have 2 brown eyes or 2 green eyes. And apparently I jokingly said, "And should I wear a wooden leg?" I don't know. I mean, couldn't say that today, but I just did. But I just, we are about to tell the world that we have scoured the world for this perfect person, and everything about you is wrong. Oh, and here she is. So that was my entrance to the Bond world.
But working on a big production like that,
Huge
production. What were the challenges for you as an actor to not only rise to that occasion, but really stand out?
Well, I had done a bunch of theatre, and I'd done those other movies, especially, the Anita Line, which was a great role, and Strauss Family. I was nicknamed by Roger Moore Baby Bernhardt because I thought it was an acting role. Actually, I was really required to look pretty and run 3 paces behind a man with a gun, wearing less. In high heels, and then find a way to, at some point, kiss him when he's 6'4" or whatever he was, and you're 5'4". These are challenges. These are actual, really important things to learn. How to run up to a little box and climb on it, and just happen to be tall enough. Things like that. How did I took it really seriously, and I really thought it was a great acting role, and I was ridiculed for taking it that seriously by Roger.
But you also work with like Yaphet Kotto.
Now, Yaphet Kotto was very interesting. He wore earplugs all the time. He decided he was, Marlon Brando. So he'd never actually heard a word I ever said. So he would kind of look at me like this, and then look at me like that, and then look around to see if I'd stopped talking. And if I had, then he'd say something. And then presumably I'd talk again, and he'd do that again. And it was absolutely impossible. I mean, there was no, he never heard me, ever. He just looked to see if I happened to have stopped talking. And then, I was not sure about that. But there was this wonderful actor, Geoffrey Holder, who was playing Baron Samedi, and he was a dancer and an artist and an amazing guy. And so I was watching those rehearsals, obviously being a dancer, that was so much more fun for me. And we ended up with this idea that because I had done classical ballet, that I could be carried in there, to this sacrifice in a hold, in a ballet hold. And I used to hang out with him.
That movie obviously was a very, very big film. The floodgates must have opened, I'm assuming anyway, that you probably got offered a lot of roles after that. But here's the thing, Jane, don't want to just be like a sex symbol. You are an actor.
Yeah.
How did you decide what to do next? How did you decide to use that platform to grow as an actor and to take on roles that people would appreciate you as an actor?
Well, I wanted to go up for anything I possibly could. I think I did Sinbad after that.
77. Yeah.
Yes, with Taron Power, and things did not go like that afterwards. I mean, they went like that. It wasn't the Bond film, but I did. What did I do? Sinbad and Frankenstein.
You did Battlestar Galactica.
I did. That was until I came to America. That was long after.
Okay.
Yeah. No, when I was in England. So anyway, basically the point of the story is that I did work in England, and what I decided is I wanted to go into the theatre. So I went back into the theatre, and I played Lady Macbeth, I played Ophelia, I played Nora in Ibsen's Doll's House, 2-weekly rep. So every 2 weeks I was doing something. So I did Agatha Christie, I did Alan Ayckbourn, I did Noel Coward. I mean, you name it, I did it every 2 weeks in different places. And that was my answer to how I was going to learn my craft. And then I did end up doing some BBC, Our Mutual Friend. That was a Dickens. That was a really great role. That was the Leo McKern and John McHenry. Phenomenal. He played Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet. So that was kind of how I learned. I studied on the stage, playing a major role and performing eight shows a week. So you can imagine, you're mounting Shakespeare, and you're actually performing in something else that night and twice on weekday, on matinees.
It paid off because in 1976 you got your very first Emmy nomination.
Well, what happened is that I would get this close to a major movie, and I've never forgotten it. I had been somewhere, and I went to meet Schlesinger for Yanks, and he had seen me on television on the Johnny Carson show or something, and I apparently said, "You got a Mancunian in the makeup room," or whatever. It was a better Mancunian accent at the time. So he assumed I was actually from Manchester and thought I was perfect. And I nearly got that role until someone said, "Oh yeah, she's a Bond girl," and that was it. Never heard from him again. That happened time after time after time. So I realized that being a Bond girl was, at that time, almost like a curse.
Yeah, crutch. Yeah, for sure.
It didn't matter if I could act. And at that time, there was what they called kitchen sink drama. So they did not want anyone that photographed or looked, I was referred to as exotic. I always played, a Persian princess or, somebody overly, probably Eurasian usually. I don't know why. And long dark hair and slanting eyes and high cheekbones and tan. I don't know, maybe. I just never seemed to get the roles that I wanted to. And I would get this close every time. Mm-hmm. So I had done Our Mutual Friend, and I'd come to America because I had heard that we were going to try and see if I could break in here. And I met a casting director called Renee Valenti, and she met me and she said, "If you could lose your English accent, there's no one out here right now that looks like you and can actually act." Well, I'm sure that's not true, but I was flattered enough to actually take this seriously. And I went back home and told my agent, said, "Guess what?" And he said, "The worst mistake of your life would be to go to America. You must never go to America." So I'm thinking about it, and I'm still wondering, how am I going to get the kind of roles I want? And I thought, well, I'm going. And he fired me. So I came to America. I had a 6-week return ticket. You're allowed to take only 300 English pounds out a year. It was written in your passport at the back. I didn't know anyone, had no work permit, obviously. And I came. And the only really good news was that my father was a gynecologist, ob-gynae, and he just had a patient whose sister lived in Hollywood. And she also sang. The patient sang as well as the sister, and the sister turned out to be Olivia Newton-John.
Wow.
So I ended up kind of being the unpaid nanny friend of Rona, Olivia's older sister, and eventually I met Olivia. But I was literally living on soy nuts and the odd miso soup or something. And I do remember being introduced to the agents at the casting directors at Universal, and they all went. And I was sitting in the wrong seat, and they thought I was waiting to go to be someone on the tram. And I'd been very patient for about half an hour. And you're supposed to, no, you were on the wrong seat. No, you go over there. And nobody paid any attention. So every single casting director at Universal went, hi, bye, hi, bye, hi, bye, hi, bye. And that was it. So then when I get my first job at Universal, and I was told that I had to sign a 7-year contract, I went, maybe not. And I'm the only person of that era that did not have to sign the 7-year contract. And I think I did like 6 or 7 shows in a row at Universal. Once I got started at Universal, I never stopped. And those casting directors had nothing to do with it.
You mentioned that there were roles that you came so close to getting.
Yes.
How close did you get with Star Wars?
I don't think I was ever considered for Star Wars.
Did you audition for Star Wars?
No, not that I know of, no.
Oh, okay.
No, I did audition for Spielberg for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Oh. Is that what you're thinking of, maybe?
Probably, yeah.
And Karen Allen got it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Okay, let's hear it.
You want to hear that one? Okay, so I, along with probably every actress, auditioned. And the way that Stephen did it is you'd go to his office and he has a kitchen there and you're told that you're cooking a rum baba. Well, I've never eaten a rum baba. I've never cooked a rum baba. I think I'm an actress. Why am I? But I'm told that's what you do. You go in there and you continue cooking whatever the last actress was cooking. And then he talks to you while you're cooking. So I thought it was very interesting. Anyway, I did that and left. And then Stephen asked if I would like to come. He heard that I'd been asked to do East of Eden and to play the role of Kate. And he said, have you ever seen the Jimmy Dean movie? I said, no, I haven't. He said, well, I'll screen it if you'd like to come by. So I actually went to his house, had dinner. He showed me the movie. And then I pointed out to him that I'd be playing the other 2/3 of the story, which is from age of 15 to the bit that Joe Van Fleet won the Oscar for. But I was never told. I still thought I was going to get this role, especially after that screening. And he was delightful. It was lovely. I then go to work on East of Eden. And one day, Karen, is that her name? Yeah. She comes up to me, oh, Stephen says, hi, I'm doing Raiders. Like, that's how I found out.
Wow.
But, yeah.
Okay.
I did, in East of Eden, I did win Best Actress.
Yes,
so
you did.
That's okay.
Hold that thought.
We'll get there later, yeah.
Hold that thought. Okay, yes. I mean, like, this is like a career
You got to jump all over the place.
But because of how old I was at the time in the 70s, I was a massive fan of Battlestar Galactica.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. That's good stories there. That's part of the whole Universal, experience. So you have to understand the first thing I got was Captains and the Kings, and they couldn't. It was on my last day of the 6 weeks, right? And they couldn't get a work permit. So I was about to leave, and then they offered me McLeod, playing an Israeli tank commander. I went, what? So the next thing I know, I'm working for Glenn Larson. Right. And he does McLeod. But I'm working with Dennis Weaver. And I'm on my lines. I am perfect. I come to work and they change everything. Like they rewrite the whole thing. And I went, I've done reps. Good thing I know how to learn quickly. So they did it to me every day. Every day they tried to throw me. And it wasn't until I was in New York and Dennis Weaver sat me down. We were filming and he said, I have an apology to make. And I said, what is it? He said, well, I thought you were a special friend of the producer, but you have to understand that I realized you're actually a really good actress, but the embarrassment is you're English and you got a work permit and I'm president of Screen Actors Guild and I got the position of president to keep people like you out. And so that's what happened. So now after McLeod, the Captains and Kings people saw me in the commissary, realized I could get a work permit, got another role for me. That ended up being, I got nominated for that. It was insane. And then Glenn Larson, of course, came back to me and said, I want you to do this thing called Battlestar Galactica. But they didn't give me any notice. They called me and gave me the role at lunchtime and said, we're going to night shoot in like 5 hours.
Wow. Oh my God. Oh my God.
And I literally did not know where I was. It was the bombing, the end of the planet. And
Yeah.
I had no
Silent
idea. I had no,
attack. Yeah.
it was a very scary baptism by fire. But I did have a wonderful experience on it. And then I finished. And I was the only one that wasn't in the series because I died of galactic cancer. That was my role. I did it very well. You will never know. Why? Because I get a call from Glenn Larson. He says, well, we want you to be in the series. I said, I'm dead. He said, not exactly. I said, what do you mean? I said, I spent 6 weeks dying. He said, well, we cut all that bit out. I said, well, then there's nothing left. He said, and we reshot everything, but you tested very highly and we want you in the show. Then Lorne Green calls me and begs me to be in the show. So I turn it down. So they double my pay. Then they triple my pay. Then they quadruple my pay. At one point, it got to a point where I said, okay, fine. I will do 2 episodes. And everything and anything you want me to do in the series, I'll do. So I flew a battleship, got married to Richard Hatch, all of that. And to this day, people remember me from Battlestar Galactica. I'm even on those cards, those
The Topps cards.
Pops cards.
Yeah.
But there is a funny thing you don't know. Okay, so there's a big poster that goes up about Battlestar Galactica, and in those days, they used to do paintings from the photography, and it was like a collage thing. Well, when we were shooting in the middle of the night, the destruction of the planet, Boxy was too young to work that late, so they had a little person, probably in his maybe late 40s, playing the role. And I hugged him and held him, and we finished, and we said, cut, and he didn't move. He didn't go anywhere. So I was being as ladylike as I could be. He was very nice. It was delightful. It was just really... And the odd part is, if you look at that poster, you'll see they took the photography of that night with me, not with Boxy, but with this gentleman.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to go back and look at it.
And painted that.
You mentioned how, and this is something that I can assume happened a lot throughout your career, especially when you were doing like all the miniseries that you've done, that things change at the last minute. Oh, we rewrote this scene and we're shooting in 2 hours. So the question I have for you is, how do you remember your lines?
Oh, gosh. You know what? When they're really well written, they're really easy for me to learn. If it's a conversation and I know who I am, who they are, what's happening, and I actually listen to their cue, I usually will learn my line pretty quickly. If it's a speech, that I can have some control over too. But when I read a script, even today, as I'm reading, I'll come across something and I will know that will be the line that I'm going to try on when we shoot. I always know. I can always tell. And I just practice. I just go over and over and over them. I'm meticulous about it. And the shows I've been in, the writers are insistent that you do not change one word, not even punctuation. And I've met actors recently who do something I don't understand at all. Apparently, the new technique is you get rid of all the punctuation and you learn the whole thing like until you stop. Like, really? I mean, how does that work? That to me is just insane. I mean, in life, you have to think about what you're going to say, and you are going to say it because somebody or something just happened, or your train of thought just changed. But you're not going to not have punctuation.
Sure, right.
Punctuation's there for a reason. I really don't understand that one. But I did play Americans only when I came to America. I listened to Renee Valenti. So I literally, if you look at my IMDb, did way too many things. And it was only because I would only play Americans from everywhere, from Ohio to New York to the South to, yeah.
Well, right after I remember the Galactica thing, I went and saw a film as part of one of the first dates I ever went on. One of the most romantic movies ever, Somewhere in Time. As you can tell by the applause, this is a beloved film. This is a movie that has gained so much over these years. But it is just such John Barry's score, the costume design, the chemistry with you and Christopher Reeve. What was your approach to this film, what informed your approach to your performance?
The script. I read the script. I fell madly in love with it. I wanted to do it so badly. And I was so used to disappointment that I just, when I met with Christopher Reeve and the producers and the director, I just thought, well, I'm probably not going to get it. So I think I'll just go to the beach. And we didn't have cell phones in those days. So when I eventually decided to come back from the beach at the end of the day, there was an answering machine with endless, messages. Where are you? Why are you not here? And all of that. But my approach was, she was the greatest stage actress of her generation. So mercifully, I'd done, some traditional classics, and then playing the love interest of Christopher Reeve, it was just magical because he was just a magical person. He was really also worked really hard at his craft. And I remember the first day I said, maybe we should rehearse or do something. Or no, I said, no, I wasn't not rehearse. I said, how about you like to go out for dinner? That's what I said. And he said, oh, no, I can't. I'm working on my part. And I said, oh, what are you doing? He said, well, my acting coach has told me to write a play. So I'm writing a play. We're in Mackinac Island, right? This is the most beautiful place. And he's going to stay in his hotel and write a play. Okay. I said, why? He said, because I play a playwright. I said, yes. Pause. Don't you play a playwright who's actually can't write anymore because he's lost his ability to write? He went, you're right. Where were you eating? And that was it. So I took the method right out of his performance. And we just became really, really close friends. The magic you see, the chemistry you see on screen, was very real. And we remained very close friends until the day he died.
The two movies that Christopher Reeve was really the most proud of were the first Superman movie and Somewhere in Time. So my question is, when you're trying to remember your lines and you're thinking about your performance and you go to the set on a day to perform, to act, but then you're with someone like Christopher Reeve and there's this chemistry there, like how does that bring something out of you that even you weren't expecting?
Oh, I mean, that magic of our relation, this limited time we were together, it was magical. I mean, the island was magical. We just kind of played off of one another. We really, almost became like Richard and Elise. And I've always felt that the real love story, the really interesting one would be, what was happening while we made Somewhere in Time. That would have been but we kept it all very secret. And then we found out, we were both single at the time. And then we found out that it was announced that he was going to be having a baby.
That's right. And
that was the biggest, the hardest acting in my entire life on anything I have ever done was the scene where he finds the penny. And the reason is not because it was a hard scene to play, which actually it would be really, but it was because I had just had the conversation with him in which he had found out this news and we were both in shock. And my lines of dialogue were things like, are you married? Do you have children? And all these lines, these things that I say. And meanwhile, if I watch the show, I can see that in the close-up that my tear ducts, my tears are like halfway up my eyeballs, and I am playing the role and at the same time telling myself, you are not allowed to cry, you cannot cry, this is not about being sad, you're very happy. So and we got through that scene. But I think that the tension of what was going on and the focus that we both had to have to just play the scene and not think about real life, I think added an element that would never have happened in other circumstances.
One of my favorite moments in the film is when Elise is on the stage.
Yes.
And she goes off script with this monologue.
Yes.
That is right. Yeah. How many times did you have to film that?
Well, that's also very interesting. So I did it in long shot and medium. And then they needed to come in for close-ups. They didn't have time to do it that day, so I had to come back and do it. And Christopher Reeve wasn't available. So I had to do it to someone off camera. And the person they chose was Richard Matheson, who wrote those words.
Richard Matheson.
And the story goes from his daughter, I think it was, told me that I did it to him, right, directly into his eyes. And he was so profoundly taken aback and felt that actually I had declared my love to him. And he was happily married, that he literally went home to his wife immediately. And he left.
It's like, I got to go.
Yeah, apparently that's what happened. His daughter told me that.
When did you start to feel like the movie was catching on? Like, it took years for that to happen. But, like, I mean, again, the applause when I said the name of the film. Like what do you...
They tried to kill that film.
Why?
Okay, first of all, it was a very, very low-budget movie. Secondly, it was... the Blues Brothers came out at the same time. Again, it was Universal. So they decided to bury us and put all the money into trying. They weren't sure Blues Brothers was going to take off. So they were trying to push that. Thirdly, I was now on Broadway doing a little play called Amadeus. My agent had told me I would never be able to get into the theatre in America because English theatre didn't count. Anyway, here I am doing that. And Christopher Reeve was doing a play at the same time in New York. I'd just done East of Eden. That came out that same week. And we were not allowed to do any press because there was a strike, a Screen Actors Guild strike.
Wow.
So we were not allowed to talk about this movie we loved so much. We weren't allowed to talk about any of it. And we were devastated, and we didn't know, there was nothing you could do other than go on the street and say, hey, by the way, we made a movie you might never see. So it was buried. And it got the worst reviews ever for Chris. I mean, it absolutely, somebody wrote the most horrible review. I read it the other day, and they were very nice about me, but absolutely decimated him. And he kept saying when we were filming, he said, I'm star for a week, you know, it's all going to, the bubble's going to burst, it's all going to be over. But he loved this film. Anyway, ages later, he said, you're not going to believe it, but this little film of ours, you know, the audience has found it. And then I said, a friend of mine lives in Hong Kong, and apparently they're obsessed with it there. I then went to Hong Kong. I couldn't go anywhere. I had, 10 armed guards around me, and they thought I was the Beatles. I mean, this thing played for over a year in every theatre. It was the most successful film in the history of Hong Kong. And then it grew and grew and grew.
At the American Cinematheque in Santa Monica, about a year and a half ago, they showed, it was a tribute to Christopher, so they showed first Superman, and they showed Somewhere in Time. And so Superman's over, it's a little bit of a break. I thought, probably half the people are going to leave. The Somewhere in Time screening was more crowded than Superman. So,
well, I'll tell you, the fans of Somewhere in Time call themselves the International Network of Somewhere in Time Enthusiasts. And they publish a thing called Insight. And to this day, after all those years, and how many years that is, they still do this. And they go to Mackinac Island and they reenact our scenes, and they wear our costumes. And Chris Reeve went back and saw this before his accident. And we'd always promised one another that we'd meet at the island one day. And then, of course, with the accident and my schedule, we never were able to. When eventually I was able to go there, I went there all dressed up. I couldn't believe it. Chris has said, you're not going to believe what the fans are doing. And to this day, they're doing it. And in October is every October, the Somewhere in Time weekend. And it's sold out. It's sold out before they even open it. And it's absolutely phenomenal. There are fans from all over the world, and they all get dressed up, and they can all recite that thing better than I can.
Oh, unbelievable.
Note to self, learn it this time.
By the way, it holds up so great because it's basically a period piece. It could have been shot today and look and be just as beautiful and emotional. I was going to ask you about Amadeus. It won 5 Tony Awards.
Yes.
So you're doing TV, you're doing film, you're doing stage.
I was told you couldn't do all 3.
But
Back in those days, you had to do one or the other.
Now, which medium at that time, or maybe even to this day, do you prefer?
It's not really about the medium for me. It's about the material. I mean, Amadeus, I read that and I went, oh my gosh, this is a phenomenal piece of theatre. My agent said, it'll never be successful because it's a serious play on Broadway and they don't work. It has to be a musical. I'd been offered something else and I said, no, this is, even if it closes on opening night, I want to do it. So I love to do theatre. But I think for me, I love the magic of the close-up. That's where I belong. Not just in the close-up, but I just I love playing with the camera. I feel like I'm dancing with the camera. I feel it's there's an absolute magic for me to work with the camera, and I feel it captures so much more than what you can capture on stage, where you are projecting and you're that much further away. I really want to go into the mind and the psychological. I want to see people closer myself personally. So I think I love film, but I really actually love television now, and I'll tell you why. Because first of all, it's as good as film. Sometimes better.
Yeah, sometimes it's better.
Secondly, you can tell much longer stories, and so create much more in-depth characters that grow, which is really exciting. And television's been really good to me. So I would not dismiss television. I love the idea of being in someone's home or on their screen, and that they can binge watch it and actually feel that I showed up at the end of their day and took them to another place.
But before we even get you mentioned East of Eden.
Yes,
you won your first award.
They didn't want me for that either, by the way.
Tell the story.
Because these people want to know how you get these roles. Okay.
This is perfect.
I'm going to tell you, I did a thing called the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. In my opinion, the worst piece of ever. And I'd never heard the word TNA. I didn't know what that meant. But I'm playing an undercover, reporter who's going to infiltrate the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders and find out. And of course, I'm wearing the cheerleading outfit. I'm dancing.
Laura Cole.
Are all doing that. Highest rated movie in the history of television until Who Killed JR. A 52 rating or something. It was a huge success, huge. Because of that, the people making East of Eden were told, Barney Rosenzweig was it, I think, was told that he had to hire me. So I come in to meet him. I've already been offered the role. And they said, would you go and meet with the producer? I said, absolutely. And I go to meet him. He said, why should I hire you? I saw Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders. It's a piece of... And you do that, and now you're supposed to play the greatest role that's ever been written for an actress ever in American literature. And I just waited, and I looked him in the eye, and I said, yes, because I know how to play her. And I gave him this really evil eye. Like, I thought of Kate. I just thought, okay, she's just going to kill you. And he looked at me and he went, okay. And apparently the story is he then called the network and said, okay, you're right. I can see. And then I did the series. I did the show. And, well, I don't want to, take too many problems and stuff. But my role ended up being much bigger and more important with some editing. There was much more material that Tim Bottoms did that didn't quite make it. And but Bruce Botzleitner and I had an amazing relationship. It was a great role. It was. I knew when I was doing it that it was an extraordinary gift. And I do remember playing 15-year-old Kathy Trask, who kills her parents, one day, and the following day, playing 80, whatever she's 70-year-old arthritic Kathy who's dying. And then the next day they had me play her at 15. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. This is really fun.
I've read a quote. You said, I like to play roles that stretch me as an actor.
Oh, absolutely.
How did Kate Trask stretch you?
Well, all of them are American to begin with, right? Yeah. Kate, playing evil incarnate, what you have to do is you have to understand why. And if she's sociopathic, she doesn't even know she's evil. That is norm for her. This is, you won't give me that? Oh, I'll just take it. Oh, you're going to stop me from doing this? I'll kill you. Next, and she'd go, I'm going to kill you. She'd just go, no, you're dead. And so it was this sort of, what I had to find in her was her Achilles heel. And her Achilles heel was the sons that she'd abandoned. That was her Achilles heel. I also was filming in Salinas, and they took me to the church where the real person that Kate was based on. I heard an expert there actually introduced me to lots of material about Kate, about the real one, not the one written, but the actual person did exist. And that was kind of spooky and interesting. I loved that character.
What point, whether it's the late 70s or the 80s, did you start to really feel like, I'm good, I can really make a living doing this? Because that's like the biggest fear for a lot of actors. Like, I want to make a living as an actor. When did you start to feel like I am making a living as an actor?
Well, gosh, that's a good question. Well, I had managed to buy a house. I mean, that's making a living. Actually, I did a thing called Battle of the Network Stars, and we won, and that was my down payment for the house. So yes, with Kurt Russell, he had blood trickling out of his mouth, and we're pulling this rope, uphill in Pepperdine, and they'd rigged it for the others to win, but we won. So I'll never forget that. So that was actually how I got the money for the house. You made more money doing that than acting. I've never ever really thought about money because I didn't have any growing up, really, so to speak. And I started working when I was 13 in sort of background and dancing and stuff. And then I couldn't afford ballet shoes, so I created embroideries and knitting and stuff, and I sold that to pay for ballet shoes. So I'd always been very entrepreneurial. And so when I first came to America, one of the first things I did was to buy a house that no one wanted and change it and refurbish it. And then I'd go to garage sales and be a bit clever. And then people would buy them. And then I went back and forth to England, and they had pine furniture that was cheap and could ship. So I would put together houses that looked like little English cottages, and then someone would walk in and buy it fully furnished. So while I was being an actress, I was actually doing other things.
Smart. I mean, you got to have a backup plan just in case.
Yeah. And to this day, I would say that most of the living I have earned has not been through acting at all. It's been actually through design and art and other things.
There you go.
In fact, now I get paid SAG minimum. I do small movies. I did a wonderful movie for Alicia Coppola called And You Are, and I was paid SAG minimum $200 a day, and my wig got $500 a day. And the hairdresser got $500 a day, but I got $200 a day. So I thought it was interesting.
That is interesting.
But I would have paid $200 for the privilege of doing that movie. Or probably a lot more.
So 1988.
Yes.
Emmy winner, Jane Seymour. Let's hear it for Emmy winner, Jane Seymour. How did you prepare to play Maria Callas in Onassis, the Richest Man in the World?
So I had been asked to, by now I was doing like every miniseries.
Yeah.
I mean, I was called Queen of the miniseries. So every time there was a miniseries, it was either me or Richard Chamberlain.
Right.
I mean, he was playing the male part, so I was okay. we weren't going up against him. So I was asked about Onassis, and I was actually offered either role. I could have played Kennedy or Maria.
Why did you choose Maria?
Well, my father was a huge fan of Maria Callas, had seen her perform. I grew up with opera. I used to watch opera when I was a child because my father was a doctor for the opera singers at the Royal Opera House. So opera was in my blood, and I just loved that. And I also, I just loved the idea of this woman who was this extraordinary star and then married the richest man in the world, or didn't marry him, but was involved with the richest man in the world, and pretty much gave up everything and ended up incredibly sad and lonely and miserable, listening to her arias whilst lying in bed with a couple of dogs eating a tub of ice cream. That was what really happened. Anyway, I was asked to do this thing, and I just thought it was an extraordinary role. And I mentioned it to a director friend of mine who said, well, you're going to have to meet Alan Seabright. And I said, why do I need to meet this man? He said, because he is the world's authority on Maria Callas, La Callas, as he called him. So I met him in his green caftan in London, and he looked at me and let down his nose and said, and why should you play La Callas? And I went, because I really believe I know how to play her. And anyway, we had a long conversation, and then he looked at me and said, okay, I'll help you. He opened up everything. He gave me everything. He had documents on Callas you couldn't believe. Every scene, every hairstyle, every accent. Her accent would change if she was in Italy or talking to someone from America or someone from England. I mean, the information he gave me on Callas was extraordinary. And so when I came to work, I went to the makeup room and I told this hairdresser, look, this is how I have to look. And she went, yeah, on whose budget? Not ours. And I said, no, we have to do this. So by some miracle, I persuaded her to get some tatty old cheap wigs and cut them up and do her magic. And between that and kind of dyeing my hair dark, she ended up winning an Emmy as well. So I learned the arias. I went to, I was living in Santa Barbara. I went to the head of music at Santa Barbara University. And I asked her, I said, can you teach me to sing like Callas? And she said, obviously it was never going to be my voice. She said, Callas sang in a completely different way from any other opera singer. And so you have to do this, that, whatever it was she told me. I then watched countless movies and footage, which Alan Seabright had given me. But when the time came to do the arias, we did 3 arias in one day. I did Medea, and I can't remember what they were, but 3. And we shot for 20 hours because we only had that theatre for 20 hours. And literally the cameraman collapsed. So I don't know how we got that material done. You know, just changing over from costumes and makeup and hair and remembering it all. But the thing that really pissed me off was that I lip synced to perfection. They gave me the singer, Alan Seabright had found. He forgot to ask her to sign the document that said we could use it in the film. So after I'd done it, and they were editing it, they lost the rights to that singer, and they had a singer come in and sing to my visuals. Well, you do not get opera singers to sing arias to, you know. So every time I watch it, I cringe because it's not in sync the way it should.
The scene with Raul Julia, what was it like working with Raul Julia?
Well, it was very interesting too because he was completely miscast. He's a brilliant actor, but the real Onassis had a sort of Napoleon syndrome. I mean, he was tiny. Oh. He was a small man. Raul Julia was 6'7" or something, and a large presence. But he was actually funny because when we were in Greece, he would just be Onassis. He thought he was Onassis. He said, we all have dinner, we all have lunch. And all of a sudden we'd all arrive. You know, no one was actually talking about who's paying for it. And then, of course, the producers ended up with the bill. So they didn't like him pretending to be Onassis at all.
It's heartbreaking when she says...
But he was great to work with. Incredible.
The scene where Maria says, I can't sing anymore. If I lose you, I have nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's heartbreaking because, I mean, we know what happens to her. But you sure did do a lot of miniseries, especially throughout the 80s. And in 1989, the doozy was the 12-part miniseries War and Remembrance.
32 hours.
32 hours.
I am also known for killing the miniseries.
But that, Natalie...
Jastro, yes. Again, they did not want me. Okay, this seems to be the story of my life. I didn't realize there was a theme here, but no, Dan Curtis wanted the original actress whose name I've now forgot, Catherine, who was it that played it in Winds of War. So it was 12-hour Winds of War. And then they came back and did War and Remembrance. And the network didn't want her. And she didn't get very good reviews. But he was absolutely adamant he was going to get her back no matter. So he said, you can send me any actress you like, I'll test them. But, this other girl's going to be the one. And so I met Dan Curtis. And what he didn't know is that my mother had been in a camp in 3.5 years in a camp herself. And my father had opened the gates of Bergen-Belsen. And his family were Jewish, and we'd lost a lot of cousins in the war. And so when I was doing my audition, I don't know where it came from, but I think my mother and my ancestors just came through me, and whatever it was. And I did this audition, and he looked at me and he said, "Aren't you glad you tested now?" Very abruptly. And I went, "I don't know, do I?" And I walked out. He made me wait for weeks. I was in the middle of shooting something for Howard Koch Sr. I can't remember, Crossings or something like that, another miniseries. And, oh, God, Howard Koch Sr. couldn't stand it any longer. He just kept calling Dan Curtis up, saying, "Please, will you just tell my leading lady whether she's got it or not, because this is, like, too painful."
And you filmed in Auschwitz.
We filmed everywhere, including Birkenau and Auschwitz. And we filmed, in the real train station with the real train. The whole thing was real. Wow. We filmed in the winter in minus 20 degrees. Everyone's head was shaved. They hired local people in Poland who were either nudist or anorexic.
Oh, wow.
And what Branko Lustig, who was the first assistant director, did, he had been the first assistant director on Sophie's Choice and Holocaust. And in both cases, the director wouldn't allow him to stage the background the way he wanted to. He had survived Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen himself, and I think possibly Theresienstadt. So when I came on the set to start, he took me aside and he said, "I want you to meet some people." And what he'd done is he had gone, Dan Curtis said, free reign. Branko, you do it your way. And Branko had contacted every synagogue in Europe, especially Eastern Europe, and said, "If you survived like I did and you want to make sure this never happens again, please come and join us in the making of War and Remembrance." So there I am. Every time I'm doing a scene, there's someone next to me with the real tattoos, with the real Star of David that they've hidden in their costume. And for example, the boxcar scene, we were in a very nice warm studio, but there was a boxcar. And once you're in it, but there was no roof on it. It was like a set. We were all crowded in there, and we're shooting, and this one guy literally lost the plot. I mean, literally had a complete psychotic experience, because the last time he'd been in it, he was on his way to Auschwitz. I was, trying to split mica in Theresienstadt, and this woman next to me, she just looked straight down and she just did it like a machine. And I thought, oh my gosh, how can she do that? And then I realized, of course, she'd been in Theresienstadt. So I was surrounded by real survivors. Wow. It was unbelievable. So very little acting was required. It was really, again, knowing the character and allowing the atmosphere, literally, the place, the people, that allowing it just to happen. And Sir John Gielgud was magical to work with.
I read a quote that you said about War of Remembrance. There was less of an acting job and more of a personal pilgrimage.
Yeah, it was. I was on it for 9 months. It took 5 years to make that movie.
Wow.
And in the middle of making it, Chernobyl happened. So they closed us down, and then they figured out that the radiation cloud was not in Poland. It had gone somewhere else. And they worked out there was more radiation in a 747 than there was in the particular part of Poland we were in. But needless to say, everyone left because, that Chernobyl. I remember Sir John saying, I said, "Well, are you worried, John?" And he said, "If they tell me that I'm going to die of radiation poisoning in 10 years from now, I'll be very happy to hear about it."
Well, with all the miniseries that you
Yeah.
did, with all the feature films that you've done, with all the episodic TV that you've done, in the mid-90s, 94, you get a ongoing television series, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. How did this even come about?
Okay. I was married to my accountant, the accountant to all the major stars at that time. And he managed our money, and he got me to sign everything. And one day, I don't know, I just had a sixth sense thing, and I talked to a friend, and I said, "I know everything." And this friend said, "How much do you know?" And I went, "I don't actually know anything," but I didn't tell him. And then I found out that my husband not only been unfaithful, like multiple times, but but I then found out that he had lost all our money.
Oh my God.
So basically, I call up my agent one day and I say, I need to work yesterday. I found out I was 9 million in the red with lawsuits from every major bank, including the FDIC. I've just won or been nominated for everything I've ever had done. I was called Queen of the miniseries. I had a castle in England, a very beautiful estate just around the corner from where Prince Harry lives now, and two beautiful children, and I couldn't even imagine this. So my agent called all the networks and said to me, you said anything? I said, yep, literally anything, because I don't have anything, and they're going to take the house, and I don't know what I'm going to do with the kids. So he calls me at 7 o'clock at night and sends me this script and says, look, you have to read it tonight, and you have to make a decision by 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. the following morning, I had a meeting at Paramount Studios. They were going to develop a 3-camera comedy for me, but it wasn't going to be ready for another year. So I read the script. I couldn't stop crying. I read it again. It just completely moved me. I went in and I said, what do I do? And I told these Paramount people, they said, oh, don't worry about it. It's a nice little film. You'll be excellent in it. You start right, like as soon as this meeting finishes. I started the next morning, actually. But it'll never make, I said, but I have to sign 5. Don't worry about it. It's a woman in the lead. That never works. It's a medical show. That doesn't work. Family Values definitely doesn't work. And it's dusty. It means it's a Western. So I signed for 5 years and the rest is history. And I didn't realize it, but I found out later that CBS didn't actually want it to work. And when I went to the upfronts, I went up and I said, I've just been watching all the other shows on CBS, but I think this is the hit. And they got so angry with me. Sagansky said, why did you say that? I said, because it's really good. Aren't we supposed to be selling it? He said, huh. So then they tested it. It tested higher than anything they had. They tested it again. And then tested again. The guy who did the testing said he was going to quit testing because they didn't put it on the air. So they put it on to fail opposite the Orange Bowl, and then followed by Saturday Night, which was referred to as the death slot on television. It came in top 10, 7 and 10 on those 2 nights. And the rest is history.
There you go. The rest is history indeed. And you were talking earlier about episodic TV, especially today, how it's often better than the movies. I mean, it's true. Sorry. And I'm a movie guy. But I got to say, I went back and I watched a few episodes of Dr. Quinn, and it's also streaming on Amazon Prime, all 6 seasons. So I watched the pilot, and then I watched the last episode where your daughter gets married, and just kind of bookend. And it absolutely holds up. It's a show for everybody. It has such great family values. But when did you start to sort of feel confident playing her? You know what I mean? Like the first few episodes, it's the pilot, you're finding your way.
Well, I remember I accepted it. And at that time, I just had dinner that night with Alan Thicke. And Alan Thicke said, oh, don't do it. He said, a woman can't do a 1-hour series because there's too much pressure on looking good and it's too difficult. You'll never have the energy to be able to do it. But I had to. So I said, I'm sorry, Alan, but I'm just going to go do it. So I do. And I remember being on set and just thinking, how am I going to learn 9 pages a day? It was a lot. And on top of that, I was sick when I first started. And on top of that, they never asked me if I rode a horse. And they put me on a very narrow part of a canyon on a horse in a Western, with a corset. And I think 5 Native Americans side saddle who all said they could ride and necessarily couldn't. And, coming and the horse is rearing and there's a precipice. So, there were a lot of elements that I was concerned about. But the magic of that show, number one, was the writing. Beth Sullivan was a genius. She put together an incredible writing team. It was beautifully directed. But the chemistry, Joe and I, we had chemistry right off the bat. And, I would say in my entire career, it's happened twice, that and Christopher Reeve. And when it's right, it doesn't mean you can actually have a relationship with them, but it definitely, there's an energy that is magical to play with. And he was, he was a young actor who'd done a soap, and he would, when he didn't have scenes, he would actually stay and watch me work. He told me the other day, he said, I learnt so much from you. I said, you did? He said, yeah, I'd just stand there and watch because, I just thought, you know what you're doing and I can maybe learn something from this. So I don't know, I was very flattered. But that's what happened.
But this is also like, I mean, not including like obviously War of Remembrance, because that was like a whole season if you think about it.
Yeah.
But still, you had 6 seasons of Dr. Quinn.
22 episodes a season.
Yep, 22.
And Muggins over here takes 2 months off. No, I go and do another movie, don't I? Of course I do.
Of course.
Of course. So, no, I never took time off.
But when did you start? I mean, I know I asked about feeling more
Feel
confident in the
comfortable,
role.
confident.
I guess the question is this. When do you start to feel a sense of ownership? Where,
Of the role.
If in the role, like where you say, I don't know if she would do that, or maybe she would do this instead.
I felt it immediately with Michaela Quinn, as I did with Elise McKenna. When I feel I know who she is, I then grow as the character with the circumstances I'm in and the people I play opposite. And, if you put the work in, if you study the lines and you make sure you get enough sleep and you make sure you have enough energy, a lot of it's physicality too. And I just, Michaela Quinn just came to me very easily. Of course, you have to understand, my father was a doctor. So I actually was a doctor's daughter. And I did come from the east to the west. And my father was a great believer in educating me, not only in medicine, because I used to watch surgery from the time I was 10, but he used to take me to the Wellcome Museum in London for the history of medicine. So I always felt, because my father had passed before I got this job, and I always remember going on the set every day, and we were out in Paramount Ranch in a national park, and I kept looking up thinking, thank you. I felt like he gave me the role. And it saved my life, my kids could go to school and come back to my trailer and do their homework and play with the horses and the dog and all of us. And actually my little children ended up doubling for the other children. They were the same age and colouring. So when they weren't allowed to work anymore and they needed, back of head or long distance, my kids occasionally were extras.
So with every film, TV show, every stage you've done, you take stuff with you to the next thing.
Yes.
So when Dr. Quinn finished at 6 seasons, and you played this character for 6 seasons, I think it was 149 episodes. What did you take with you?
Well, first of all, we thought we were going to start work the next day. No one told us it was going to be cancelled. It was a very abruptly cancelled, so we never got a chance to say goodbye at all. And we are a family, and we still are a family after all these years. Well, so that was very hard. So what did I take to the next? I have no idea what I did next. You tell me.
What you did next?
What did I do next?
Oh, well, actually, you did a lot. But hang on, before I get to that, we get questions submitted from all you. So Clark actually is asking, any thoughts on a Dr. Quinn revival?
I just did an interview with TV Guide just now for something else that I've got coming out. And they were asking me, they said, we've got to do a campaign for it. But when we tried to pitch it, because Beth Sullivan wrote a really lovely script about the next generation, but Joe and I would be in it. But, I didn't know whether that's exactly what the fans want, but it was good. It was really good. We tried to pitch it. We pitched it to CBS and we got turned down. So we couldn't get anyone to want to make it. They kept telling us it was too expensive because of the horses and the rest of it. But what they really told us was the reason that nobody wanted to see a Western. I said, excuse me.
What?
Excuse me. I mean,
what?
There's Westerns wherever I look. I mean, Yellowstone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
wait,
it was basically a lie. It was basically a lie. So now what has happened is the other day, I'm sure some of you know, but during the fire almost took my house out, but it took out Joe Lando's home, everything he owned, and his wife's family's home in the Palisades. And they had nothing. And they ended up living with us for about 5 weeks with the dogs and the kids and everybody. And whenever I do a photograph or anything with Joe, it gets ridiculous numbers on my Instagram. So the other day, I was doing something for my charity for Open Hearts Foundation. We thought for the fans, we'll invite them to come and see Joe and I talk a bit about Dr. Quinn and then also talk about the fire and, how do you get over trauma like that. And at the end of it, I was in my art gallery and I paint as well. I have a whole career of that. I said to Joe, would you like one of my original paintings? I'd like to give you one for your house. And he said, I've always loved those. 3 of them, right? I said, okay, they're yours. So at that moment, I picked up my camera, or somebody picked up a camera, I think Sherry, and we gave him a picture of me and him, and then we went to that thing, we filmed it, we put it up on Instagram. At the last count when I came here, 2.8 million people. 2.8 million people are liking this thing, this tiny little bit of video. And now we just put another thing of just the two of us standing next to our wedding outfits. Anytime I do anything with Joe, we did a Lifetime Christmas movie. It was their second highest movie for the entire year. So we have to find something to do together. If it's not Dr. Quinn, we have to find something because the chemistry is still there. The fans are there.
Clearly the fans are there. How could they not?
Do you want to know the biggest worldwide, globally, which country has the most fans for me?
Let's hear.
And Dr. Quinn. Where do you think? Where? France? No. Japan. No. Where? Nope. Iran.
How do you know that?
I have no idea how that happened, but apparently it's playing very successfully in Iran. So, and maybe it's the clothes.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know how to follow
or the values.
Unbelievable.
I don't know, but anyway, I'm. There must be a way of. Yeah.
There's got to be. If you're getting that kind of track going.
We did do something really crazy. We did a Funny or Die. Will Ferrell wanted to do Funny or Die. And I said, why don't we? I said, because it always occurred to me that Dr. Quinn, the only thing she had to offer, was morphine and whiskey and a leather strap for having babies. With somebody running off to somehow boil some water, which meant they'd have to chop down some trees and light a fire. And no, it was so morphine woman.
You asked what you did next. You did a lot. You do a lot. Oh, you. As far as I can tell, looking through your work, your career, you never had a dry spell.
I think there was a spell where I did guest starring on things,
right?
And that was interesting because I was guest starring on comedies.
How did you like doing comedy?
Well, I love doing comedy, but no one ever let me do comedy. So, I guest starred on all these comedies and I had a blast and I loved it. And I also learned what it was like to be a guest star. I realized they put you in a little cubicle or your little room, and you are not allowed out of that room until they say they are ready on the set. There is nothing more terrifying to an actor than to sit there staring at a mirror, doing their lines for the 10 millionth time and waiting 6 hours for something that they're only going to have one chance at doing. And then you go on the set and everyone else has been in the show forever and they're talking about the dog, the cat, the car, anything other than the scene. And they're going, oh yeah, what are we doing? Oh yeah, okay, yeah. And you have that one moment, you've got to get it right. So every time now that I have a series, every guest star that comes on, I have this technique. So I go into the makeup room when they come in the morning and introduce myself. And then I tell them I'm very old and I have trouble learning lines. So would they like to run them with me? And then we get together and we run them and we figure out our characters and what we're doing and everything. Then they call us on the set to stage it. Okay, director decides what he wants. And then we go back. And by now we all know each other. We know the name of one another's dogs, kittens, whatever, children. And then we just run the lines again and again to help poor little me. And then the director goes, oh my God, what happened? I said, well, we just rehearsed it, didn't we? So now that's what I do. Because I don't ever want to ever have anyone feel that way on my show, ever. I was terrified. And by the way, I can't audition. I mean, auditioning for me is literally impossible. I quake, I shake, I don't even know why I go. I mean,
who would make you audition at
well,
that point?
sometimes they do, and you know what? It's a terrible mistake. But I did audition for Wedding Crashers, so that was okay.
Tell us about that audition. And by the way, you stole that movie.
Thank you very much. Yeah. You see, this is another interesting thing. So Dr. Quinn had ended, and I remember I was told I could go up for Wedding Crashers. What does that mean? That means you have to audition. probably ever done it, but whenever I have, it was not a good thing. But okay. And so I go and I think, well, I've got to show them that I'm not afraid to do the scene, with the Owen Wilson. So I wore a black bra and a white lacy blouse on top to sort of show that some element that would be okay. So I'm doing this thing with the casting lady, very nice lady, probably my age, with a nice little mini camera. She said, "Oh, say your name and then do the scene," and then she reads off the off lines. And I'm playing all this kind of sexy stuff with Owen, but it's not Owen, it's this woman. And as I said, I always play off of whoever I get. And it's not that she wasn't good at reading the lines; she was excellent, but she wasn't that guy, right? So I get through it. I go home. My agent calls and says, "Can the director speak to you?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And so Dobkin calls and he says, "You were very good, but we wondered whether you come in again and if there's any way you could up the ante sexually." And I said, "Probably if I played opposite anyone other than another woman my own age with a small camera." So I'm just so now I come back. And they've got the guy that's the bridegroom in the beginning. I can't remember his name, but
Vince Vaughn.
No, not Vince Vaughn. One of the small, not Owen Wilson. One of the smaller roles. Anyway, he went on to be a star. I should remember his name.
Bradley Cooper.
Not Bradley. No. He was the guy who was the bridegroom in the first scene. Anyway, whatever it was, and he was lovely. And we rehearsed it, and I kept looking at him and just thinking, okay, now this is possibly even more embarrassing than doing it the other way. But anyway, I go in, I do it, and I get the part, and now what I realize is that Isla and Rachel are teasing Owen and saying, are you ready to see more or see more? And I go, "Vince, you think that's really an original thing?" But we were all living in the same kind of area. Bradley Cooper was in the next room. That was an interesting experience. He had lots of visitors. And I was there painting. I brought my paint. So I would just paint away and another visitor, it was really, it was fun. But what happened is that scene, I knew when I read it, I knew it was like the best thing in the movie, I thought.
Absolutely.
And I remember my then husband, James Keach, read it and he said, "You can't do this. So Dr. Quinn fans would go nuts." And then I went, "Oh, I can't." No, so I put it away. And I thought, but I'm not doing Dr. Quinn anymore. So I read it again. It was even funnier. And he said, "You can't." And I put it down again. And then I opened it again. I said, "You know what? Who cares?" And, if they will be offended, they won't watch it. It has an R on it, so they won't watch it. Secondly, I'm never going to be naked, so that's not an issue. And maybe we'll introduce them to a new form of amusement they might actually enjoy. So I did it. It was an incredible experience. Owen was fantastic to work with, very nervous, even more nervous than me.
Wow.
Really nervous. It was hilarious. He had to put his hands on my breast, and I was wearing covers, so I was never ever naked, just so you know. But he looked like I was, and he'd put his hands like this on my breast, and they went, and then they'd go cut, and then Dob can come and say, "That was excellent, really good, Owen. Your hands just a little stiff. Could you relax them?" And he'd look at me, and I'd go, "Look. If it was Jason Seymour, I'd probably say no. But right now I'm kitty cat and I just asked you to do this. So yeah, it's fine. Okay. Okay. So we go and he comes, he goes like this and he takes it, he goes like that. So Dob comes like, "That's so much better, Owen. Do you know, but a little movement would be good." So, by now I am literally dying. I feel like I'm a specimen in a doctor's office and we're teaching a class on anatomy. And then Owen says to me, he whispers to me and he says, "When we do this take," he says, "when I leave, just say pervert." I said, "Okay." So we do the thing. And then I went pervert. And the director, everyone came out and said, "That was amazing." That line was not in the script. That was Owen. And it made it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That movie's...
Every time I see Owen, I tell him that I can't go anywhere. There's 40-year-old men. They come running after me and they think I'm kitty cat.
All right, so you did Dr. Quinn. That went on for 6 years, and so what was your first take on Harry Wilde, which is on Acorn? Yes.
So what happened is I was offered this, and I didn't realize, but I was the only person it was ever offered to. And I met Dave Logan, who wrote it, in London in a hotel, and we had a glass of wine. And originally, Harry Wilde was supposed to be a chain smoker. I don't smoke. And anytime you see me on camera smoking, it stops the entire movie. It's like, I can't do it. So we were drinking red wine, so we decided Harry would have red wine. And we kind of got talking, and the character really developed even more when he got to know me. So by the time I actually came to shoot, he'd put a lot of Jainisms in there. I mean, for example, I am always telling my children how to talk properly. And when I, telling them how to spell colour with an O-U-R and flavour, O-U-R, things like that, English things that are useless to them in America. And I was actually dismissed as being a helper at the school, in primary school, for my children. I was told, please go away, don't help. But I played the moment I met Rohan Ned. I met this kid who's playing my sidekick, and he was brilliant. I'd seen his tape, and I said, that's the guy. He was English, but he never spoke a word of English, only this absolutely perfect Dublin, very specific to the street accent. And the entire crew absolutely believed that either they went to school with him or knew him, and he never broke out of accent, ever. And I never heard him speak with an English accent ever. I had no idea what he sounded like until we finished the first season. And then when we said, wrap, that's it, he then started speaking English, and he spoke just like me. And everyone was in shock. The crew hated him because they all loved him. They thought he was Irish. But he was just so easy to work with. And, again, there's an amazing chemistry between us. Amazing. And what's great is it's nothing to do with a sexuality or a love interest or anything like that. It's an older woman and a young boy who doesn't want to go to school, and a professor of literature, English literature, who quits and definitely drinks too much and has never been married and is has a slight mouth on her. So not Dot Quinn, by the way. But Dot Quinn fans love her.
What type of acting challenges were unique to Harry Wilde that you didn't experience doing Dr. Quinn?
Well, Harry's just such a different character. Obviously, with Dr. Quinn, I'd have all that medical jargon to say sometimes. In Harry Wilde, I have a lot of literature that I'm supposed to know. So they had that in common. I wanted Harry, she's feminine, but not overly feminine. She doesn't fuss about how she looks. She's cerebral. And she doesn't take fools, lightly. She's just... And she's not afraid of anything. So I also had to do a lot of action. I had to do running, jumping, and all of that. I'm 70 years old. I'm 74 now. And I remember thinking to myself 2 weeks in, as I had to run to rescue someone in my boots across this field, I went, I'm an action hero. I'm just going to show him how to do it. And I'm doing this. And what I didn't realize was that they hadn't taken the felt off the bottom of my boots from the scene the day before, when the clatter, 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 for the noise. And I slipped and slid and smashed my kneecap. Oh. So 2 weeks in, the entire crew are going, okay, that's it. We picked the wrong show to be on because this was obviously going to be cancelled. And they picked me up. They put ice and whatever. And my co-star that day was a 48-year-old or 54-year-old Down syndrome gentleman who had worked and worked and worked to be able to say these few lines. And he came up to me and said, you're, what did he call me? Hop along. Oh. And I went, hop along. I said, damn it, hop along's got to get up there and finish the scene. So they carried me to the scene. I had ice and bandage and whatever, and they held me up, and I did the scene. I finished it. The next day they told me I'd smashed my kneecap, 6 weeks in a cast. We thought, that's it. I did not miss a beat. I went back to work the next day. They put a removable cast on, and I had a walking double, and obviously a stunt double, but you can't tell. I've looked at it like crazy to see if you can see when it's me and when it wasn't. So I would say in Harry Wilde, just being able to walk and play that role was almost impossible, but you can't tell.
You were talking about how
the crew was so helpful. I mean, they were all behind me. They couldn't believe it that I didn't quit.
You were saying that you were doing an interview, I think, with TV Guide or somebody about a new show that you have coming up. Is that Relative Secrets?
Yes. So Relatives. Also, yeah. So Relative Secrets is a. I'm hosting, in this one. So it's 4 stories of people, families, that there's a secret in their family. You don't really know what the truth is. And we investigate it, and then we come back and tell them, what happened. And it's a great show. It's really fantastic. So then Acorn's never had anything like that before. And we have someone who goes out and meets all these people and the families. And I did all my meet and greets with them by Zoom because I was in the middle of doing Harry Wild. So I was doing both shows at the same time. They seem to bookend movies for me when I do Harry Wild. Every time I go to Harry Wild, someone will call and say, I really want you to be in this movie. And I said, well, I can't. I'm doing Harry Wild. He said, well, you must be able to have a couple of days off. And I said, we can all squish it into 2 days. And I go, no, I really wish, I'd love to work with you. Nothing would thrill me more than to do this role. But, I'm not there. I'm not here. And he said, well, where are you? I said, Dublin. He said, that's where we are. I went, okay.
Oh, jeez.
Irish wish. Irish wish. Now that's acting, okay? I never did a single scene with Lindsay Lohan. I'm running around doing the entire role in 2 days with a cell phone in different corridors. I mean, I had to create the entire whole thing in 2 days. So, that was an interesting thing to do.
Wow.
And it was quite a success too, apparently.
Yes, definitely is. Yes.
I'm glad I did it in the end.
So, all right. You were hearing you talk about Instagram.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back to like the early part of your career when who the hell knew what social media was back in the 70s and the 80s. And it got me thinking of like how you have always worked. There certainly has not been a substantial lull at all over these last, since 1970. So how have you been able to pivot in a business that has changed, that has evolved, that has been kind of difficult these last few years with the pandemic and the strikes and so on and so on. But you have stayed relevant. You are in demand.
I know, it's crazy. Sorry.
How have you, is that just like a conscious thing that you've done, or have you just gone with the flow? Like, how have you?
Well, I mean, when 9/11 happened, the actress who was supposed to be doing a movie in Nova Scotia decided she didn't want to fly, understandably. I took that job. That was Wild Horses movie. It was a great little movie. Then just now, when COVID happened, in Australia, they asked me to do this wonderful movie called Ruby's Choice, playing a woman with Alzheimer's. It's a fabulous movie. And they said, look, you'll fly there and they'll have COVID protocol and you'll just be in a hotel for 2 weeks. And production said, you'll just be there one night and then we'll get you. Armed guards, machine guns, police, locked up in this tiny little hotel room for 2 weeks. It was scary. Yeah. But guess what? We pivoted. The other actors got on Zoom with me. We rehearsed ourselves. We knew that movie backwards before I got out of that little room. And I felt like I knew them. I knew we all knew one another. It was nothing to do with production. We just got together and did it. So I tend to, I don't know, I keep trying different things, And I think it's because when I first started, I never wanted to be typecast as, a Bond girl or whatever it was going to be. I wanted to be a character actress. And that's really what I am. And I think the older I get, the more fun I'm having because people have stopped worrying about what I look like. They're more interested in how I play the character.
There's so much that I haven't had a chance to get to but I could certainly stick around for another 90 minutes. But is there a TV show? Is there a guest starring role? Is there a film that you love that is special to you that you would like people to look for and check out?
Oh, one of mine?
Yes.
Well, one of the old ones that was kind of cool was Scarlet Pimpernel. I think people loved that. It was really nice. I think Ruby's Choice was pretty good. I did a wonderful one with Malcolm McDowell, a little independent movie called Bereave. That you may not have hit your radar, but it's really good. Really great performances in that. What have I done? I can't even remember what I've done. What have I done? Oh, Kaminsky.
Kaminsky method. Yes.
Kaminsky method.
Excellent. Yes.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Yes, and that was really fun because I got to meet the what? No, not Michael. The right. No, the producer, the writer, the creator,
Chuck Lorre, yes.
Chuck Lorre.
Yes.
So I got to meet him, and this was funny. He said, "I don't know whether you're going to play the love interest of Michael Douglas or Alan Arkin." But I'd already been told by my agent I had the role. But what role? It wasn't written. It didn't exist. It was in his head. Because he writes those as he goes. The guy is a genius. Literally genius. And we didn't even know if I'd been in 1 episode, 3 episodes, or what. It all depended on whether he liked me and it worked and whatever. And then he randomly said, "Okay, Alan Arkin." He said, "But you're too young." And I said, "Not actually." He said, "Well, you look too young." I said, "Don't worry about that. There's this great grey wig I've met." I showed him a picture of me in the grey wig. He said, "Okay, that'll work." And first day's work, after we'd had a read through a network and everything, and I've known Michael Douglas forever, we go on the set to do the first scene, and just actors and 1 extra. And Michael comes up and shakes hands and says, "How do you do? I'm Michael Douglas." I said, "Michael, it's Jane." I said, "What did you think? They recast or something?" Like since yesterday. But yeah, no, I love that. I love to do comedy, really do. But to me, comedy is just reality intensified. And I personally don't play comedy for comedy. I just really, that character seriously believes that what she's doing is normal. and it's got to be grounded. It's got to be grounded. Everything's got to be grounded.
What was the best piece of advice a fellow actor, director, producer ever gave to you?
Richard Attenborough said, "The day you believe in your own publicity, you're dead." And he also said, "You were born with a fine instrument. Now your job is to tune it, to fine-tune it."
That's pretty early on too, huh?
That was the first things I heard. And I remember one director telling me that I had to be my own person. I didn't really understand what he meant. It took me many years to get there. I have always worried about what the director said, what they wanted. You know, I was always a people pleaser. I was all terrified. You know, it had to be the way they wanted rather than something that I might come up with. And so now, again, on Harry Wilde, what I do, people say, "Are you directing?" I sort of kind of, in a way, do. And the director and I have this understanding. He'll say, "Can you do something with that person?" But what I do is when we do a scene and it's really good and they say, "We've got it," and I know somebody in that scene has got something else in the tank. Because I know what it feels like when you're trying really hard, but it's still everything, but you're just slightly holding back. But if somebody just said, "Hey, we've got it, now we're just going to throw it upside down and backwards to see where it lands," and I call it a freebie, and we do freebies, and I've been told that in every edit of every show, the freebie is always the shot that's used. So that's what I try to do. I try to get everyone together, because it's not just about me. I don't understand actors that won't do off camera. I just don't. I don't get it. I will give as much off camera as I do on camera because I want the best out of that person. If they don't give me a performance that matches what I'm giving to them, if that isn't a connection, I'm acting in all by myself, and it doesn't work. I know a lot of people do that, and I can understand doing it. I have wanted to save my energy on countless occasions, I can tell you, where I didn't want to have to do it off camera. But I always do because I care about the whole. And I have found that if people on my set or anywhere I have any kind of control feel like we're all there equally and we're all making this together and we're doing it because we love it, then it shows. The audience loves it. They can tell we're having fun on Harry Wilde. The audience can tell.
You definitely are having fun on Harry Wilde. Last question is this, because we are here with actors, and because, it's rough business. What kind of advice do you have for actors who are still trying to find their way?
I mean, it is incredibly hard, but I think in this day and age, you have the good fortune of having the internet, and you can create your own material and you can put it up there and somebody can see what you're doing. You can write it. You can find people who are great writers. You can find people who want to be directors. You can find an idea and do something with someone. You don't have to keep it in scene class. You can take it out there and shoot something for nothing with your iPhone. Literally. And so if you want to be seen, you make it, you put it out there. Musicians are doing that now. They have to. Then, they're not getting the deals that they were getting. You have to put it out there and make it. And I think when you do that, it's about, if you love acting, you have to keep acting. And you're going to be rejected for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with you. It might be they're looking for someone, different ethnicity or taller or shorter or, whatever it is. You can only be the best you that you can be. And then I think you have to brush it off and move on. And I have to tell myself this when I go to that audition, you are trying to solve the problem that the director and the producer have. They're trying to find you. Now, if you are who they're looking for, they are thrilled. You have taken a load off them, off their shoulders. They go, we found her. She's here. And then I personally, I have a very disciplined work ethic. I'm known for it, and I'm proud of it. I'm always first on set. It doesn't matter if I smash a kneecap or have bronchitis. Nothing stops me. And I think being physically and mentally prepared and prepared with the work, I think it pays off because people ask other people and say, what was she like to work with? And they go, oh, yeah, that was easy. I actually bring my own wardrobe, hair and makeup with me. That's how obsessed I am. Because I've been on movies where the wardrobe didn't fit or it wasn't right or they couldn't find anything. And I just thought, well, I'm coming here with the character. If I bring part of the character with me, maybe we don't need it, but it's in a suitcase. I bring my characters with me all the time, always.
Keep bringing those characters with you. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane Seymour.